Welcome to Victoria's Nirvana with your host, Dr. Victoria Ravenwood, where it's all about empowering the sisterhood. It's time to free our inner Amazon, honor the feminine, and change this world.
Today, I'd like to talk about darkness, power, and the feminine. I remember years ago listening to something by Osho, and he stated that the dark is actually more powerful than the light. And that was interesting way of framing this whole light versus darkness. I think that there's, the good versus evil dichotomy that we see a lot in literature and film, but bringing that to light versus dark shouldn't really apply that automatically dark is evil or bad, but that's what we do. And this can also be brought out to culture of whiteness versus blackness, and there's a whole other level there, of course. I'll just put that out there as well. But for the sake of this talk, I'm discussing it in terms of power and the feminine. And it's just interesting to me when he said that, because it kind of reframes so much that darkness is more powerful than light, than it is something that we would fear. It's something that would go to the depths and the core of who we are. It would be our projection of our fear of power, of the unknown, of the unconscious, of going into those areas that are not filled with light and knowledge. So it makes sense to me that the dark could be more powerful than the light, because the light comes from the dark. The light is created from the void. And in the biblical text, it's God said, "And let there be light." Light is life. Life comes from light. And light comes from darkness. So the very essence of who we are comes from this darkness, from this raw power. And a lot of goddess imagery was seen in this darkness. And it is this whole fear of female power that is at play in that whole idea that goddesses and this feminine is bad or wrong, or the feminine arts of just being an herbalist or a healer or psychic was deemed wrong and of the dark. And a lot of the imagery of goddesses became very dark. She, in one of the most widely known ones would be the goddess Kali, who is a very powerful goddess of death, transformation, creation, and cutting through the crap of things to get you to see truth and be enlightened, and how she can destroy stuff. But also this element of being creation or a creator. And it's just interesting that that is seen as something to be feared, and there's so many trainings with her, or mythology, or books on her with warnings in them about how powerful she is. And it's this fear of that feminine power. Be careful, be careful. And also it's the fear of, well, you're going to get what you asked for, and you're going to take those masks off, and you're going to lose your ignorance. And that can be a very shocking thing. And that's the energy that they see within her. But it's still, this darkness is to be feared around her. And it's just like the same in Lilith. We find her mentioned in the Bible, and integrated later with Inanna, who I wrote about in my book, 45 Master Characters, Her Descent into the Underworld. There's a lot of these goddesses going into the underworld. Lilith, Inanna, Persephone, Ereshkigal. A lot of goddesses who, Hecate, all went into the underworld and have this aspect of them, this fierceness and this power and this transformation and this creation. But there's also this darkness about them, because that symbolizes our fear of them and our fear of their power, our fear of the change that they can wrought in our lives if we honor them or read about them or approach them in any way. That these archetypes and the mythology around them, for some and for others, they're very real, and they're a very real energy that exists, and this is the name that we put on that energy. And if that is the case, then we're choosing to put a lot of female names onto the energies that we are afraid of or saying that is bad. It is this whole fear of our power and putting darkness as synonymous with evil and bad and things to be afraid of. And I always just remind myself of what Osho said, that darkness is actually more powerful than the light. And that's why so many people are afraid of it, and it can trigger people. But it is not evil. There is nothing that I see in any research of this that is inherently evil about any of these figures, or that they do evil things or can be used for evil ends. And I think that if you believe in them as being a real energy, and you try to use that energy to harm, I think the fear is you're the one who'll wind up being harmed by your intention and the energy and chaos of it, and how uncontrolled it is. And that's another aspect that makes it get classified into the feminine area, this uncontrolledness, that women can't be controlled, that you never know what's going to happen, that feeds the whole narrative of it being bad, of it being fearful, of stay away from it, don't approach it, don't honor it, don't go near it. That's regulated to the feminine and to darkness, and you should fear darkness and chaos. So it's very interesting to me to see this whole dichotomy playing out in light versus dark, and good versus evil, and male versus female, and creation and destruction, and to see it play out in all of these goddess figures. And that there are, I know there are dark god figures, but there's a lot in the goddess pantheon. And it is to support, it supports that whole notion of being afraid of female power. That's probably one of the reasons why the Amazons are so popular and so interesting to people for hundreds and hundreds of years, because it's this whole thing of what is female power, and is it something to be feared, and is it just women trying to be men? Is it chaotic? Is it dangerous? Is it something that we should lock up and lock away and stay away from and shun, and make sure the women in our lives don't demonstrate any of that power whatsoever. So I just want to leave you with a little bit of a different perspective on feminine power, on light versus darkness, and that there may be something to darkness being more powerful than the light, and that's why we fear it, that's why we categorize it the way we do. And not ignoring that there can be cultural and racial issues with that as well. And that's a whole nother topic for another podcast. But just to think that that whole notion and perspective that we have to be afraid of the dark, to be afraid of these goddess figures that are of the underworld or darkness or are very powerful or very fierce, can be misguided, and that we need to make our own decision and just have that for some food for thought, because it was very mind-opening when I read that from Osho. Because everything, especially the New Age movement and healing movement, is very much on the light, the light, the light. And that doesn't mean if you are intuitive or psychic or exploring women's spirituality that you should immediately be afraid of these goddess figures or female power. But look at the overall dynamic that's going on and be open to exploring light and dark from a different angle and different perspective, and see how that might open up other things in your life. Have a great day. Stay fierce.
Thank you for listening to Victoria's Nirvana. Tell your friends to listen and visit victoriasnirvana.com to subscribe and join the Nirvana Sisterhood.